Chapter 3. Your recorder and its controls.
Now that I have the recorder threaded, what about all these controls? Is this where I get stumped?
To the contrary, Bob. Mastering the controls is as easy, if not easier, than threading. Let's start at the back of the machine and work to the front. Notice on my recorder there's a well right here where I keep my mic and extra reels and other equipment such as cords and tape splicer. Now this is just for carrying and storage, since I think it's best to keep the well clean when I'm using the recorder. What I really wanted to show you is what's in this well. Notice this metal plate next to the recorder mechanism? See, it's perforated. So is this housing around the outside of the amplifier. Now if you feel here at the bottom of the unit, feel right there. There's a cutout with another perforated plate. Now these perforated plates are for ventilation, and that's why it's important that they be open while the machine is operating. I mentioned this to Bob Haynes the other night because he had his unit sitting on a chair and it was blocking the bottom ventilation. These are just tips that'll prolong the life of your recorder and provide the best operation. You know, like everything else, care saves wear and repair. Now, the next thing you see here, Bob, is an outlet marked 110 VAC, 150 watts. That's 110 volt alternating current, 150 watts. You'll notice that I have my matching amplifier, speaker, power cord plugged into it. This is a real VM convenience, boy.
How so, Frank?
Well, the electrical power for my matching amplifier speaker comes through my recorder. When I shut my recorder off, it automatically shuts off the amplifier in my other unit. That's really convenient. Of course, it isn't just limited to a VM stereo mate. Other external amplifiers are plugged in and work the same way. Now, notice, Bob, over here to the right of the power outlet, there's a small outlet labeled Stereo External Amplifier Outlet. This cord, plugged into the outlet, has the other end plugged into my stereo mate.
What does that do, Frank?
Well, that feeds the second track of stereo to my stereo mate, and it is played through the amplifier speaker system in it. You can also use this same outlet for VM's famous Add a Track feature.
Well, what are these others for? The ones marked Hum Balance 1, Hum Balance 2, and Eye Sensitivity. They don't look like outlets or inputs to me.
They aren't, Bob, and listen, take my advice, forget they're there. These are very sensitive controls that were properly adjusted at the factory and should not be touched. Unless someone is qualified for VM service, you'll only get into trouble, plus the cost of having a serviceman readjust the controls properly.
Enough said, Frank. Let's continue.
Well, here on top of the unit is what we call the deck. Each of our reels are mounted on spindles. This one on the left is the supply reel spindle, and the one on the right is the take-up reel spindle. You remember we mentioned these before when we were threading the recorder. Now, over here on the right side of the deck is the pause button. See, it's even marked pause right there on the escutcheon. If the pause button is pushed straight back and to the right, it locks in position and stops both reels simultaneously. The pause button is a feature that helps make your VM the most convenient recorder to operate.
Well, what does it do?
Well, several things. For instance, when you're ready to record, lock the pause button, then put the recorder in record position. This allows you to set your record level or volume before you actually begin recording. You don't use up any tape for testing, and it gives you complete control for best recording results. When your record level is set, just release the pause button, and you automatically begin recording at the proper volume level. Another good use would be for recording from radio and television. The pause button is our commercial eliminator. After we record the music or voice we want, just lock the pause button in place until the commercial is over, then release it and pick up our recording.
Say, you could use the pause button for interruptions in dictating letters, too, couldn't you?
You certainly can. Say, you're beginning to see the possibilities, Bob. While the pause button is small and inconspicuous, it's a mighty big help in making recordings. This is something you'll find true of all VM features.
Well, here's a button over here on the left side of the deck that looks just like the pause button, but it's labeled monitor. Is it for a similar reason?
No, but it is a feature, Bob. You use the monitor button to feed the sounds you're recording through the amplifier and speaker of the recorder so that you can hear what you're recording as you record. As an example, we can connect the radio to the recorder through the phono-radio input. This is the same one that we used for the mic, but we only insert the plug halfway in, and then we push the monitor switch back toward the rear of the deck. Now, as we begin recording the program from the radio, we can hear exactly what is being put on the tape through the recorder's speakers. If we don't want to listen, we simply cut out the sound by bringing the switch to the off position. Here's another good example. Suppose you wanted to use your recorder as a public address system. Let's take the microphone and insert the plug all the way into the microphone input, like this. Now, we lock our pause button in position and set up for recording. If we don't want to record what we're about to say, we don't need the pause button, so we'll depress the red stop button to keep our reel out of action. Now we switch our monitor button to the on position, speak into the mic, and our public address system is working. Here, you try it.
All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, test. 1, 2, 3, 4, test. 1, 2, 3, 4. Frank, what happened? Did I break something?
No, you didn't break anything, Bob, but you're guilty of something you couldn't very well know about. You created feedback.
Feedback? What in the world is feedback?
Nothing to be alarmed about, Bob. You didn't do any damage, unless you shattered your nerves a bit. What you did, you caused the feedback when you came over here toward me. You passed by the front of the speaker, and presto changeo, feedback. It's good to remember, so when your recorder is set up as a public address system, to keep the microphone as far away from the recorder speaker as possible, and especially from directly in front of it.
Well, I won't need to be told that twice. But, Frank, what causes feedback?
Well, the causes are really very interesting, Bob. With the recorder in the PA or public address position, any sound which enters the mic is amplified by the recorder amplifier, and this amplified sound comes out of the speaker. When the microphone gets close enough to the recorder speaker, it begins a really vicious circle by picking up the sounds from the speaker and feeding them back to the recorder. Now you have a sound going around and around and around like a dog chasing its tail, and each time it goes from mic to amplifier to mic to amplifier, it builds up a volume and tone until it finally settles down into the howl that you just heard.
Well, is there a safety measure to avoid this?
Yes, when making a recording using the microphone, it is always best to keep the monitor switch in the off position. This stops the sound from coming through the speaker system and avoids the feedback. Incidentally, if we'd been recording, that feedback that you heard would have actually been recorded on the tape. Another good reason for not using the monitor for microphone recording.
Well, my nerves are settled again, Frank, so let's continue.
Okay. Now, this little turn-type button on the top of the head housing is the speed control knob. You can set it for 7.5 inches per second speed by turning it to the right, or for 3 3/4 inches per second by turning it to the left. I can see you've got a question, but let's bypass this feature for the time being, and we'll come back to it later. Now, over here on the left-hand side of the escutcheon is the tone and brilliance control. This is actually, you see, 2 knobs in one. When playing tape, we can adjust these to get pleasant tonal balance. For example, if we want more bass response, hear more of the low notes, such as the drum or the oboe, we turn the outer ring counterclockwise to whatever degree we want it. On the other hand, if we want treble boost, to bring in more of the high notes, such as violins, we turn the inner knob clockwise until the sound suits us. Now, right next to these controls is the index timer. This is a really accurate little device. You can locate any particular section on a reel of tape quickly and easily with the index timer. When you start to record, set the counter so that all of the zeros are lined up with this little pointer engraved on the escutcheon just above the word timer, see? As you record, you'll notice the large dial revolves rapidly and the small one slowly. At the beginning of a specific recording, you jot down the numbers on the timer. There's usually a space provided on the back of the tape box for this. Now, when you finish recording this particular selection, you jot down the ending numbers the same way. And these ending numbers, incidentally, will also be the beginning numbers for the next selection that you record. Now, let's say we're going to record a series of radio programs. We set the timer at the 3-0 position and begin recording. When we finish recording the first program, our timer index, we'll say, reads 297. So we log program 1 as 0002 297. And the next program will be logged from 297 perhaps to, we'll say 583, and so on, until we have completed the tape or the series. One other point, Bob. In recording 4 tracks, we also have to keep a record of the tracks too. So, say you're recording a news broadcast last Wednesday. Side 1, track 1, 000 to 297. For this Wednesday, side 2, track 4, 766 to 905. Get it?
Not only get it, but impressed with how easy it is to use.
Right here in front of us are what we might call the motion controls, a series of 5 push buttons that put the tape recorder into action. You'll notice that each one is labeled: rewind, record, stop, play, forward.
Did you overlook this little red lever next to the rewind button?
Well, that's called the safety interlock, Bob. You recall that as soon as we depress the record button, the erase head is energized and will eliminate any sound that's on the tape. Now, as you can well imagine, you'd feel pretty badly if you accidentally erased one of your good tapes, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm.
Try depressing the record button.
It won't go down. Something's holding it back.
It's being held back by this little lever. Before you can depress the record button, you have to press this little red safety lock over toward the rewind button. Now try it.
Oh, it works. You know, it's obvious there's a lot of planning that goes into a VM recorder before the public gets a chance to buy it. Another thing I noticed, Frank, it took both hands to put the unit into record position, one for the safety lever and one for the record button. This is certainly another reminder to keep anyone from erasing valuable tape. But back to the rest of the push buttons, Frank.
Well, taking them in sequence, the first button is the rewind button. Now, this is for moving the tape from the right-hand reel to the left-hand reel. It's just as simple as that. Next in line is the record button, which we just discussed. So we'll move on to the red button in the center, which is the stop button. Bob, make a mental note right now to always depress the stop button when you've finished using your recorder. By doing this, it lifts the roller from the capstan and takes the tension off of the tape moving mechanism. It's also important when threading your machine. Here, it raises the pressure pads from the heads and allows the tape to fit easily down into the threading channel or slot without your reels moving and spilling tape. Now, the next two are fairly simple in use. The play button puts the recorder into play action, and the forward button moves the tape rapidly from the left-hand reel to the right-hand reel. Remember how we use the index timer to log our selections? Well, the forward button rapidly moves the tape forward to any selection that we want.
This next gizmo fascinates me. I noticed when you depressed the record button, a green light came on.
This has a very fancy name, if you want to use it. It's called the cathoptic tuning eye. And right above it, that white plastic rod, that's the automatic shutoff. Now let's take this shutoff wand first. You notice how it rests against the tape there? It is controlled by a very sensitive spring arrangement connected to the power supply. Now, if the tape should accidentally break or the loose end of the tape passes beyond this wand, going in either direction, the little wand moves forward and shuts off the recorder, both the transport mechanism and the amplifier, just like turning a light switch off. In other words, Bob, the tape holds the wand in an on position, and if the tape fails to do this for any reason, the wand moves forward and shuts the recorder off completely.
You know, I'm already getting ideas. I can put on a reel of sleepy time music, crawl into bed, and just listen to good music.
Yeah.
When the tape is finished, the automatic shutoff takes over and turns my unit off for me. I call that real service.
That's what VM recorders are designed for, Bob. Real service. The shutoff also works in fast forward, rewind, and record, I might add. Start your recorder for any operation and forget it. Your VM recorder will finish the job while you're doing something else. This is mighty handy, incidentally, especially for teachers and other professional people who are almost constantly busy with many jobs to be done.
Frank, what about that little green light? You called it a cathoptic eye?
Yes.
It intrigues me.
Well, an easier term for this cathoptic tuning eye is record level indicator. It's one of the best, incidentally, and most accurate types of recording level meters. Another reason why your VM recorder is really a top-quality instrument. The purpose of the record level indicator is to tell you when you have just the right amount of sound on the tape for perfect reproduction. With the unit in record position, notice the wedge-shaped dark area above the center. As our volume of sound going onto the tape increases, this wedge area decreases or becomes smaller and smaller until finally the advancing bright green covers it completely, and these advancing edges just meet but don't overlap. Now, when we reach this point, with the loudest sounds going on the tape, that's the ideal position for recording.
Oh, what happens if they do overlap?
One thing you don't want. distortion,
How do I eliminate distortion?
by reducing the amount of sound being put on the tape. You do this with your volume control. It's here to the right of your tuning eye. Simply turn your volume level counterclockwise and reduce the volume until our two green images just meet at the loudest sounds. This volume level control also is used for playback. Just turn it to the right or clockwise till you have the right amount of listening volume that you want.
That's the selector switch just below the volume control, isn't it?
Right you are. By turning it to the right position, we can select the track on which we want to record or to play back. But notice these other positions too. As you can see, we can switch the recorder to add a track or to 1/4 and 1/2 track stereo playback. In other words, 2 and 4 track stereo.
You mentioned playing 4-track stereo tapes. Since 4-track stereo is still pretty new, I imagine the selections are still limited.
Oh, quite the contrary, Bob. You can name your choice, progressive jazz to opera, and it's available in 4-track stereo tape. There are well over 1,000 selections already available, and more are being added almost daily. Oh, another thing, Bob. There's no finer way of reproducing stereo in your home, especially when you play it on your VM recorder.
You sound like a VM employee.
Well, I suppose I do, and it's just because I'm 100% sold on my VM, and I can't help bragging about it. Enough said for commercials, Bob. Let's get back here to the business at hand. Now, let's discuss this add-a-track position. This is something that VM pioneered, and it's a real amazing feature. With it, you can record yourself singing or playing an instrument in perfect timing or synchronization to material that is previously recorded on the tape. This can either be the add-a-melody tapes that you buy at the store or tapes that you can make for yourself. Since this involves the use of 2 tracks, let's bypass it for the moment, and I'll demonstrate it for you later. Right now, let's look on the right-hand side of the recorder down here near the bottom of the case, near the front. You'll notice that inside this metal casing, see, we have 2 input jacks. Now, we've talked a little bit about them before, but let's cover them now thoroughly. Each of the inputs are identified on the rim of the casing. The first one, see right there, nearest to the front, is labeled microphone on top and radio phono on the bottom. The other input is labeled magnetic phono. Now, suppose we want to record from radio or TV first. If we use the accessory cord that's included with the unit, insert the single prong on the end of the cable halfway into the radio phono receptacle.
Wait a minute. That receptacle is too big for the prong on the end of the cord. You need one like this one on the microphone cord.
Bob, you're really on your toes, boy. You'll find a phono adapter plug in my accessory box. It looks just like the plug on the end of the mic, but it doesn't have any cord connected to it. Find it? Thanks. Now, let's plug this small single prong on the cable into the top of our adapter plug. See there? Now do you get the idea?
I'm ahead of you. Now I can insert the adapter plug into the receptacle, but only halfway. Say, I could feel it click into that halfway position.
That's right. And with your connections made, just follow the regular recording procedure. And your microphone, incidentally, works the same way except, remember what I told you before?
Insert the microphone plug all the way into the receptacle.
Right. If you're wondering why we do these differently, inserting the plug all the way into the receptacle or input for anything other than the microphone will cause distortion in the recording. Remember this, even if you're recording from another tape recorder. This magnetic input is for use with phonographs having magnetic cartridges. While the majority of phonographs have ceramic or crystal cartridges, VM has added this feature for the benefit of those who do own phonographs with magnetic pickups, both for recording and playing records through the recorder speaker amplifier system. Now, in the same position on the left-hand side of the case, you'll notice another casing that looks just like the one on the right. The 2 receptacles here are called output jacks. Notice the labels on the rim of the casing. On the top it says external, so we know they're outputs. On the bottom, one output is labeled amp for amplifier, and the other one SPK for speaker. Let's take a look at the external speaker jack first. It has 2 positions or stages, just like the mic jack has. If you insert the plug all the way in, it cuts out or silences the speaker in the recorder. As you can imagine, by inserting the plug halfway in or to the first stage, you'll hear sound from both the external speaker and the speaker system in the recorder. Clever, huh?
I should say so.
Now, this second jack, for feeding the sound to an external amplifier, is ideal for playing our tape through a larger amplifier speaker system or, for example, through your phonograph console. You can also jack into a more powerful amplifier, such as a public address system in a large auditorium, where sound has to reach large crowds. In power output, it matches the stereo output jack in the well. Remember, that was one of the first things that we covered.
Well, I guess that covers everything, doesn't it?
Not quite, Bob. I think the only thing, though, that we haven't covered is right here on the lower right-hand front of the case. This is a jewel light, and when your recorder is on, the jewel will glow a bright red. You can easily spot it across the room so that there's never any guessing as to whether your recorder is running or not.
Another good idea from VM, eh, Frank?
Right.
You've given me a lot of valuable information so far, Frank. And before we continue, I'd like to make a quick recap so that you can correct me if necessary.
Good idea, Bob. Go ahead.
Well, to put sound into the recorder, we use the input jacks on the right-hand side of the machine. Whether the sound comes from a microphone, radio, TV set, regular phonograph, or one with a magnetic cartridge.
Right.
To record on tape, we first push the stop button, thread the recorder, and then, after pushing the safety interlock, push the record button, right?
Right. But I'd suggest you use your pause button instead of the stop button, Bob. That way you can release your unit after it is completely set for recording, and you won't have the click of the stop or the record button recorded on your tape.
That's right. You did mention using the pause button. Okay, so now I regulate the volume of the recording with the volume control on the right here, and make sure the green images just meet at the top of the eye without overlapping.
Right.
Oh, I forgot something. If I want to keep track of where my recordings are on the tape, I have to set my index timer at 3 zeros and log each recording. Now I'm ready to record the tape.
Right.
If I play back, all I need to do is press the play button and adjust the volume level for satisfactory listening. Also, I can adjust the bass and treble with the tone controls here to the left of the index timer. But I have to remember that if I want to hear stereo, I've got to connect an external speaker and amplifier to the stereomatic jack in the back well with my stereo connecting cord.
Right.
Now, if I want to use the recorder as a PA or public address system, I lock the pause button in place and push the monitor button to the on position. And above all, keep the mic away from the recorder speaker so that I don't get feedback.
You're doing great, Bob.
And then if I want to play the recorder through an external speaker, I plug or jack it into the external speaker jack, pushing the plug all the way in if I want to cut out the speaker in the recorder, part way if I want the recorder speaker to operate too. If I want to feed the sound to my console or a hi-fi rig, I put the plug into the external amplifier jack.
Bob, you're on your way to becoming a recording engineer.
Well, not yet, Frank. But someone told me this would be really complicated. Actually, it's a relief to find it so easy. I'm convinced Robert II can operate my recorder, and he's only 7 years old. One thing I do know, though, Frank, I'll enjoy my recorder more and get more out of it by knowing more about it, realizing all the things it will do.